In this video, we will be talking about firewalls, NAT rules, access lists, and ephemeral ports. So if you've been doing this for a while, or if you're new to networking, I think there will be something for everyone in this video. What's an ephemeral port? How does NAT really work? Come along, and I'll show you. What is a firewall? A firewall is a security device that sits between two or more networks and controls what traffic is allowed in or out based on rules. Often a firewall sits between your network and the internet, but it might sit between a more secure network and a less secure network within a company. Is a firewall by itself enough for security? No, but it's a good start. So how does a firewall work? Let's start with a firewall connected to two networks. Depending on the vendor, these will be called inside and outside, or trusted and untrusted, or even LAN and WAN. On one side, the inside, you have the good stuff. Your servers, PCs and laptops, your data, and network devices. But on the other side, the outside, you have the bad. The internet, hackers, bots, the general public, everything that you want to keep out of your network. Okay, keep going. I still don't know how it works. So firewalls use rules or policies to decide what is allowed out and what is allowed in. Many times what is allowed out is just everything. Maybe not the best policy, but it happens. But what is allowed in is usually very little. In fact, by default, most firewalls allow nothing in from the outside. So if we allow everything out and nothing back in, how do we get responses to our web requests? That's another thing that firewalls do. They keep track of all the connections going out and then let the responses or return traffic come back in. So when you make your web request out, it gets noted by the firewall in its connection or state table. Then when the web server sends a response, the firewall is expecting that response and it lets it back in. So just think of it like the firewall saying,
"Okay, yeah, you're part of that connection. Come on in."
In simple terms, NAT, or network address translation, translates one IP address to another IP address, most of the time from a private IP address to a public IP address. So what's a private IP and what's a public IP? Great question. Private IPs look like this. They're not routable on the internet. They're only for the inside part of your network. There are three major private networks: 10.anything, 192.168.anything, and 172.16 through 31.anything. The one that I see wrong most often is the 172.16 through 31. These private addresses are defined by RFC 1918, and sometimes you'll even hear them called RFC 1918 addresses. Public IPs look like everything else. They're usually assigned by your ISP, but you can own the IP block. Understanding the difference between public IPs and private IPs is a core networking skill, but it can be tricky at first. I'm keeping it simple here, but this topic really deserves its own video. Let me know in the comments if you'd like to see that. In our case here, NAT serves two purposes. Number one, security. It hides our private IP addresses from the internet. We really don't want those known. Number two, it allows us to use one public IP for our internet traffic. This conserves IPv4 addresses. And remember, private IPs are not routable on the internet. So here is how NAT works. When your computer sends out a packet, let's say to a web server, and it reaches the firewall checks its NAT rules. Is there a specific rule for this address? No? Then change the source IP of the packet from 192.168.1.100 to the public IP 241.67.92.2. And if necessary, change the source TCP port also. This is called NAT overload, or PAT, port address translation. PAT is used to translate many private IPs to one public IP. The firewall maintains a NAT table so that when the reply packet comes back, it will reference that table to reverse this change. So now in this reply packet, the destination IP is our server, and NAT changes it from 241.67.92.2, which is public, to private 192.168.1.100. Finally, in our NAT journey, let's look at static NAT. Static NAT is one-to-one IP translation, and in our case, one private IP to one public IP. So our web server goes out to another web server on the internet, and outbound traffic looks the same as PAT, except the firewall does find a rule and translates 192.168.1.50 to 241.67.92.5. But let's see how inbound traffic works. A client on the internet sends web requests to our web server at 241.67.92.5. The firewall finds the NAT rule and changes the IP to our private IP address of 192.168.1.50 and sends it to the web server. And the web server replies and sends the packet to the internet. And again, the reply going back to the internet looks a lot like static NAT or PAT. This covers NAT, but I left out one important thing in the overall process: the inbound access list. We know that by default, nothing gets into a firewall. But what if we need to allow access to one server, like a web server? This is one area that I see a bunch of people having trouble with. The absolute biggest thing to think about when we're talking about firewalls and rules and what's allowed and what's not is, where did the connection originate? If it originates outside of your network, then yes, it will need a rule or access list entry to get in. Or if you're talking to a web server on the internet and the traffic originates with you, the traffic coming back is let in because it is reply traffic. And this is one of the basic things that firewalls do, is they let reply traffic back in. So let's say you have this web server and you need to open up port 443 because you've got a secure website that you want to publish. You write a rule to do this and save it, and now the internet can access that website. So traffic that is originating from the internet can access that website on the server. That's great. Now our partner company that we built the website for can access it. But we've got to ask the question, who else can access it? Should we lock this down some more?
This is really secure though. We're using HTTPS. Yep. And there's a login prompt. You have to log in. Yep. Do you think maybe you're just being a little bit paranoid?
No, I don't, because the whole internet can access it. Now, if this was a public website, that's exactly what you want. But this time, you just want to give access to that partner company. I mean, you really don't want the whole internet to have 24/7 access to that web server and a place to try out usernames and passwords. Do you? Not this guy, right? This would be a great place for a more specific access list. Depending on the firewall, they might be called policies or even rules. Here's the basic format of an access list or rule. We've got an action, a protocol, a source, and a destination. We ask the other company what IP they'll be coming from because we need a source IP to fill in the rule. They say it will be 203.0.113.0/24. This means 203.0.113.1 through 254. An even better solution would be if they could give us a single IP, but they said they couldn't, so we'll take what we can get this time. So let's start filling out the access list. Remember to think about where the packet is originating from, and in this case, it's starting at the other company. So we're going to do a permit TCP 203.0.113.0/24. That's going to be our source IP, and then our source port is going to be any. So why any, you ask? That's another great question. This source port, any, is called an ephemeral port. We don't know what source port they're going to use. Now, this is another concept that I struggled with at first, but again, it doesn't have to be hard. An ephemeral port is just a random port that the originating computer makes up to use as a source port. That's it. Most of the time, this port is in the range of 49.152 through 65.535. But it can start as low as port 1025. So that's an ephemeral port. See? That's not hard at all, but a really important concept to understand. And to finish out this access list, we use our public IP, which is 241.67.92.5. We put the destination port, and that destination port is 443. Since that is the HTTPS or TLS port that our web server is listening on. Now with this rule complete, we've opened up port 443, but only for our partner company. So are there any possible issues we could have now that we have it set up this way? Well, what if our web server gets hacked? Hey, wait a minute. We limited access to our partner. They're not going to hack it. Come on. Okay, fine. What if they get hacked? Yeah. Okay, go ahead, continue. Like I was saying, what if our web server gets hacked? What is going to stop the hackers from getting to our entire network? Well, nothing. But let's add something. A DMZ, or demilitarized zone, is a special network that logically sits between the internet and our internal network. One way to do this is to use another interface on our firewall and put only the web server on it. The DMZ is a new network, so our server needs an IP on that network. So we change our server IP to 10.2.2.200 and move it to that network. On our NAT rule for this server, we change the source interface to DMZ and the source IP to 10.2.2.200. Everything else stays the same. And finally, depending on our firewall, we may also need to change our outside access list. So we do that. At this point, outside access is the same. We're still only allowing port 443 access from our partner company to this server. But the secret to a good DMZ is the access list going from the DMZ interface to our internal network. So if this is a static web server and there's no dynamic content, we make a rule that says no access to our internal network, and we're done. This isn't very realistic though. Probably the only reason we're hosting it here and not at a data center is that we need to give it access to some kind of internal data. In this case, we need to open up one TCP port for this to a MySQL server. So let's add that rule. The action is going to be permit, the protocol, TCP, the source, our DMZ server IP, the 10.2.2.200/32, and the source port, again, is going to be that ephemeral port, which is going to be any. Now for our destination, it's going to be our MySQL database server IP at 192.168.1.50/32, and then the port of 3306 for MySQL server. Done. Now, if the web server gets hacked and the hacker wants to get to our internal network, all of the hacker's traffic has to go through the firewall again, and the only thing it can get to is port 3306 on 192.168.1.50, our database server. Is this perfect? No. Did we just make our security posture better? Absolutely. If we have 100 computers on our internal network, other than our database server, none of those are directly accessible from the web server in the DMZ. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell if you'd like to be notified as soon as new videos come out. Stay tuned for more networking cybersecurity videos, and as always, I'll see you in the next video.